Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to look at the success of regeneration, looking at a number of criteria. The area we're going to look at in this lesson is the borough of Barking and Dagenham. You can see here a map of the borough here in London. It's a little bit further to the east of the area we've looked at before, so Stratford, Canary Wharf, Canning Town is around here. So it's a little bit further to the east. Um, so this area is very much known for its manufacturing. So in the 1960s, it had a massive Ford assembly plant making cars or assembling cars, employing about 40,000 people there alone. So it was the largest car assembly plant of Ford in Europe. It's also quite famous for a film. It's called Made in Dagenham because in 1968, in June, women machinists, so these were women that made the car seats, they went on strike to demand equal pay. So I just checked actually, the film is not easily available, but from next Saturday you can access it on the BBC iPlayer, I believe. So it will be a good idea to watch it. So there's a nice picture here of the Ford plant in 1973 on the banks of the River Thames. So many of the workers lived in some of the council estates. They were built either just before the war or after the war. Now, Beacon Tree, here's a photo of it. Beacon Tree is one of the largest uh, council houses, council estates in Dagenham. Um, and it really offered residents better homes than places they came from. There's quite a nice video here that I've got a link to. I'll put that on Google Classroom for you to watch. It's about half an hour, but it gives quite a good impression on when the estate was established and the kind of people that moved to the estate. So there's lots of interviews with the older generation. Um, more recently, the history of Barking Dagenham is slightly less positive. So in 2002, Ford actually ended its car assembly at the plant in Dagenham. They still have factory there. It makes diesel engines, as you can see in the photo, um, but obviously employing a lot less people. But so by 2015, the levels of employment had actually dropped to about 3,200. On top of that, another blow to employment prospects was the closure of the Sanofi plant. Sanofi is a large pharmaceutical company. They'd been in production for 77 years. The plant closed in 2013. So, as a result, not only the decline of Ford, but also other manufacturing in the borough, the levels of deprivation had increased substantially, even to the point that Barking and Dagenham became the ninth most deprived local authority in England. Just in comparison to elsewhere in London, it had the highest adult unemployment rate. So about just under 10% of the working age adults were unemployed, and about 27% of residents earned actually below London's living wage. Now we talk about deprivation here, so I thought it was maybe a good idea to give you a couple of possible definitions of deprivation. So one of which is you can talk about deprivation as when an individual's well-being falls below a level generally regarded as a reasonable minimum, or you can think about defining it as a standard of living below that of the majority in a particular society that involves hardships and lack of access to resources. I quite like the second one personally because it focuses on the standard of living. And it also compares to the majority in a particular society and indicates that someone has a lack of access to resources. So let's look back at deprivation in Barking and Dagenham. It is quite widespread. Now this figure on the map of Dagenham and Barking and Dagenham shows you lots of smaller areas. Now those areas are called lower super output areas. I'll come back to that in a minute to explain how they're made up. But as you can see, those smaller areas, some areas have very high levels of deprivation, so there's a very high percentage of households that are deprived. So there's, the highest is up to about 15%, so the darkest areas. Well, the lightest areas is much lower. Now, in this case, the definition here is that a household is deprived if it has at least 3 of the following 4 sort of criteria here. So the first criteria would be any adult in the household is unemployed or long-term sick. A second criteria would be that no one in the household has 5 GCSE passes at grade C or is a full-time student, so grade C, but now is a 4. Anyone in a household has bad or very bad health or a lasting health problem. That's criteria 3. And the final criteria is where accommodation is overcrowded, shared, or without central heating. So in this case, if in a household 3 out of those 4 criteria has been found, they are then considered to be deprived. So 10 to 15% of those households in those darkest areas are considered to have 3 out of 4 criteria like that. Let's have a look at what we actually mean by lower super output areas. So first of all, deprivation data is obtained from census data, which are then collected and measured in very small neighborhoods. And these neighborhoods are sort of geographical areas generated automatically by they have software for that, using measures of proximity and social homogeneity. So making sure that areas are people have similar social backgrounds. On average, there are about 1,500 residents in an LSOA and about 650 households with minimum and maximum. In England, they are exactly 32,844 LSOA in England. And what happens, data from these from these LSOA can also be aggregated into large areas such as boroughs, districts, and counties. But the lowest level of data available is an LSOA. Okay, going back to deprivation. So what's happening? Data for each indicator are collated for all LSOA. They are then ranked and divided into 10 equal bands known as deciles. So what happens then? An LSOA is ranked within decile 1. They are then amongst the 10% most deprived LSOA. And those ranked within decile 10 are amongst the least deprived. So if you look at this figure, for example, these are all rankings. So the average rankings for deciles of deprivation in 4 different boroughs in London and the City of London. So these boroughs are important to think about because Newham is the borough we've spent quite a lot of time looking at. So Stratford is part of that. Tower Hamlets is where Canary Wharf can be found. So Canary Wharf obviously is a very wealthy area, but not that many people live there. And there are lots of other parts of Tower Hamlets that are much more deprived. Kingston upon Thames is in the south west of London, is one of the wealthiest parts of London. City of London as well, lots of jobs there as well, but quite wealthy as well. And then of course we have Barking and Dagenham. So what is useful about doing these sort of rankings is you can compare, of course, you can compare different boroughs. So in this, what we're looking at in general, we are sort of looking at 7 different broad areas, indicators. So they are both economic, social, and environmental indicators. So as you can see, column 1 income indicators, economic indicators. Income deprivation measures the proportion of people experiencing deprivation linked to low income. For example, they're out of work or low wages. And obviously, if you have a low ranking, that means they are more deprived than the higher ranking. So high ranking is less deprived. Column 2, you're looking at employment, measures the percentage of working age people who would like to work but cannot due to unemployment, sickness, disability, or care responsibility. So actually, are there people in an area that would like to work but they can't? Column 3, we're start looking at social indicators. In this case, it's education, skills, and training. Measures the lack of educational attainment and skills in the population. Column 4, health deprivation, disabilities. Measures the risks of premature death and the reduction in quality of life caused by poor physical or mental health. Column 5, again, still a social indicator. Crime measures the risk of personal material crime. Column 6, looking at barriers to housing and services, so the financial affordability of housing, but also how close housing is to local services, which is quite good in London, to be honest, but obviously the affordability of housing is an issue. And then finally, we have an environmental indicator. Living environment deprivation measures local environment quality, that housing quality, but also things like air quality, level of traffic accidents and stuff like that. Now you can bring all these indicators then together and come up with an overall measure, which is the index of multiple deprivation, the IMD. And the IMD, column 8, where you can see the IMD, is used a lot. It's a very important indicator, very important index. I just looked at the borough of Barking and Dagenham here. It's quite interesting to see the level of deprivation using the IMD, whereby the darker the color, the more deprived, as you can see here. Obviously quite dark, not everywhere, because there's sort of areas here that are less deprived. And then as a comparison, East Grinstead and surrounding areas, completely different, as you could expect. Much more sort of the lighter colors towards the least deprived LSOAs in the country. Finally, let's have a look at regeneration in Barking and Dagenham. There have been several projects. Obviously, the Ford's for the site where the Ford assembly plant was is now completely bare, so it's quite a nice area to develop. It has its own dock, so it's ideal for industry of housing. Barking Town Centre is another area where they've been looking at redeveloping, so there's an artist's impression of what it may look like after redevelopment. So it was a concrete town centre, need of refurbishment, and lots of things have been planned there. The Gascoigne estate is a very large deprived housing estate. It's also being redeveloped. On the right hand side is an artist's impression of what's going to look like. Measuring the success of regeneration, I'm going to do that in a second video, because I think I'm not going to have enough time for this video. So I'm going to have a second video. We're looking at measuring the success of regeneration.